Hello and welcome back to another Discovery review, where we're going to keep the intro pretty short because I already know this video is going to take too long to do. Yes, back after Prodigy, episode 8, all in. You can see it there. That was weird. Yeah, I mean, I was enjoying Discovery, as you probably know. Hopefully you've seen the previous 7 reviews. But, I mean, Prodigy was just outstanding, and so I'm really hoping that doesn't affect Discovery. I'm not a fan of juggling all these series, at least like mid-seasons and stuff, having them interrupt each other. That's just weird, and stuff like this happens. But, I don't know, I was expecting a pretty... Like, they were about to go to the other galaxy and, like, find the people, but that's a picture of the president in the thumbnail. And of course, we're only about halfway through the series, so maybe it won't be as eventful as I thought it would be. But, yeah, we'll see how things go. Without further ado, I'm gonna go watch the episode. That was a pretty good episode, right? Probably on par with what was coming before in Discovery. It was also a step down from Prodigy. I mean, exactly as I feared. There was, of course, the one episode of Prodigy I didn't like, the time travel one, that, of course, according to the story, didn't involve any time travel, that everyone else seemed to love. But aside from that, it was just, high quality... What? How many complaints did I have through the last batch of Prodigy episodes? Like 3? I mean, this episode alone had more than 3 complaints. I'll say Burnham, at the very end, with her tracker thing, did manage to avoid my rant about why she is the worst Starfleet officer ever. I want to start with a negative, actually, because I really do need to get it off my chest. The scene where Awoshiku did the boxing to earn the money, right? I remember watching that. She kept losing, and, like, the odds against her kept going up and up, right? And so my thought was like, oh, she's intentionally losing to raise the bets against her so that eventually the ratio can be far enough where, they can get all the money they need. Which I think technically would have been 3-1, not 45-1, but whatever. But then they didn't do that. Or, like, maybe they did, but they didn't make it clear at all, because the scene where she changed was like, this is it, you're done. You're getting your ass kicked. Like, I've got to pull you out of there, or you might die. Like, we just have to stop. And then she throws a tantrum, like, no, you can't. She's like, you can't do this to me. You can't make this decision for me. It's like, yes, Lieutenant, she can. It's literally her job. Like, it's her job. She put you in there. She is going to take you out. And Burnham, being, of course, nothing but an outstanding Starfleet officer, and captain goes, fine. It's like, no, that's not how this works. I don't, off the top of my head, which, granted, is not a perfect recollection, this is the only instance across all of Star Trek that I can think of where a captain was weak. Okay, no, I'll give you some. There's some. Kirk had some moments, but, like, a captain not under some sort of mind-altering influence was just weak. It's like, no, you're the captain. Like, you were in charge here. This is an officer with a history of going against command because she wants to do something, having a tantrum, and then, yeah, she wins, but, like, what I get from that as a viewer is she won because she believed real hard, and that was enough. I'm all for stories about unwavering faith, in this sort of sense, belief in yourself, but, you need that belief that you can find a solution, not the belief that the belief is the solution. Like, it needed a line of, like, oh, that's what I was doing, or rather than a temper tantrum, you go, like, trust me, Captain, I have a plan, bet it all on this round. And then you have a captain trusting her officer, not a captain bowing to a temper tantrum. I was able to accept, though, that she couldn't just arrest Booker and the other guy there. I mean, she probably could have managed it. I suppose, actually, no, the shuttle could have beamed him out. No, maybe shields. All right, I'll accept that they couldn't have taken Book, or at least reliably. But once they left the planet, like, both Burnham and Book would have left at the same time. Like, could they not pursue Book just in orbit? Shoot him down or something? Let's abandon it. Let's abandon negativity for a bit and talk about the DMAs. It's a mining equipment, right? Which in itself is alarming on the surface. Like, if you're mining equipment, you don't bother to stop it from, like, eating inhabited planets, which, I mean, a civilization as advanced as they should really be able to do, then that is concerning. It suggests the, albeit culturally skewed, view of the sort of stepping on the ants kind of aliens. Like, it's definitely not a good sign. And of course, knowing a TV show, you know, they're not going to show up, be like, hey, your DMA is eating our planets, and the aliens are going to be like, oh, my bad, like, you know, this is perfectly reasonable, we'll stop now. Like, but if we ignore the TV-ness, you know, and actually put ourselves in this world where, in theory, that could have happened. Like, there are innocent explanations. It's just a concern rather than they're clearly evil. Like, maybe it's broken. You know, maybe there's some sort of rogue element. Maybe this DMA, I don't know, was unaccounted for somehow. Maybe everyone died in the civilization and their mining equipment's just going wild. I don't see how it'll persuade Book. Like, if anything, it makes it more likely that they're not going to listen. The peaceful first contact is still a way to go. It's also another instance, though, of, like, power requirements, where, sure, these are fictional things we're talking about. Like, we're so far beyond being able to actually calculate the energy uses of any of this stuff. But it's a bit weird to me that, like, you could harvest the, like, trace gases in a 5 light-year radius, teleport it thousands of light years away, or it was a wormhole. I think they mentioned it was some sort of wormhole thing. So, all right, let's just assume it takes 0 power to maintain your wormhole, which probably takes a little bit, and then, like, use that to make super powerful components. Like, they didn't say it was a fuel source. They said it could be used to, like, make super powerful stuff or create. I can't remember the wording Saru used, but this isn't like fuel. It's not like antimatter. They're making it into stuff that then somehow they use to create their bubble thing with energy from somewhere else, I guess. But even if they're using those trace gases as energy, like, that you could then have enough spare to actually have the DMA and make it work. But, you know, beyond that, we don't have the whole plan. It's just, it's one of those that felt a bit weird. I'll give it, it's a rather unique premise, at least off the top of my head, of, I can't really think of another storyline like this of, I guess if you want to go really vague, one species, you know, mining the homeland of another species, causing the deaths of them. I mean, that's in history. You know, if you want to go to the real basics, but the generalness of the story, the more specific aspects of the story, I think it is rather unique. I didn't feel any, like, oh wow, watching it though. I was just like, oh, alright. So, you know, maybe there were ways to have done it better. Maybe the point's not the DMA. Like, what is it? It's more the species and stuff behind it. Like, the DMA is the MacGuffin. But it was just like, the DMA is their mining equipment. I'm like, yeah, alright. That's a bit weird, but okay. I will say, though, that very early on, that was originally going to be my opener, is this is how you put Burnham in the center of the action sensibly. And how, like every other Star Trek, has put specific characters in the center of the action. Well, specifically, by the way, go against her orders and put them in the action. As Burnham, we are so often to complain that she does. You know, someone had to go after Book, and Burnham was ordered not to, right? Which felt a bit weird, because again, I agreed with Saru and most people that Burnham was the only person who possibly could have convinced him, but whatever. Let's accept, you know, she was just ordered not to. You then had Vance, not Burnham, but one of her commanding officers, come forward, very clearly, like, have his motivation of his family and not wanting to send them away after just getting them back, and going, you have a mission to do. We can't go against that mission. It's too important. But, like, I'm ordering you to do whatever you can within the parameters of your mission is the most important part. And of course, that's what she does. She could have done more to go after Book, including just jumping straight to where the tracker was rather than back to Federation headquarters and arresting him, shooting him down, But she didn't. And so when she goes back, there was an element of subterfuge and maybe even bad faith, but it's not a why is this woman not being fired and sent to prison. It's a this was sensible. It makes sense why this character is in this position. It makes sense why everyone is doing what they're doing. It's not the plot, like, for the sake of the plot. It's because it makes sense. It's just a shame that she's the kind of captain who would bow to a temper tantrum being given by a fully grown adult. This was a woman raised by Sarek. Like, she probably had a pretty darn good role model for how to deal with temper tantrums. Right, what else have we got? I think my other kind of general thought I had was the poker scene, we'll call it. I don't really know the rules of poker, and those cards especially were hard to read. So, like, I was annoyed when Book went all in, and then Burnham also went all in. Like, I tried to look up if you could do a lower bet, and of course, mind you, this is alien poker. We don't know the rules. And it seemed to be mixed results. Like, some places were saying no, some places were saying, like, it's a sign of weakness, you really shouldn't do it, which of course implies that you could, you just shouldn't. And that was going to be my rant of her being the worst Starfleet officer ever, but, when she had the alternative plan she already dealt with, sure. But what bothered me was, like, as someone who doesn't play poker and doesn't interact with poker in any way except, like, the next generation, I had never seen such an obvious display of two people cheating and working together. Now, the guy running it probably doesn't care, but are you telling me these other two people don't? Like, every single act they did was, like, weird tapping or, like, rubbing an eyebrow. It's like, they didn't do anything about it, the other two? And then it got me thinking, of course, watching this poker game where, I don't have enough information to really care or follow along. Like, Burnham and Book won because they were collaborating, right? Are you telling me the two people who were actually team members representing the same entity, are you telling me they didn't try and collaborate? I think this is what I mean when I talk about it being a huge step down and Discovery not being as good. Is generally, I enjoyed that episode, right? It had a few problems, but it was a good episode. It was enjoyable. It just wasn't the level of some other stuff I've seen. But when I actually think about stuff I have to talk about the episode, it's all negatives and things that don't really make sense or could have been done better. And I've mentioned before, when I talk about the positives in general, unless it's something really big, it's like, I liked it. And that's kind of the end of the story. When it comes to the negatives, you kind of have to explain why something wasn't good. Whereas explaining the positives would just be a bunch of like, oh yes, this had theme, this had yada yada. Oh, no, I did have something else with the theme. Where I'm kind of realizing one of the things about Discovery, and maybe why it's not landing with as much with me, and is feeling kind of different to other Star Treks, is it's extraordinarily direct in what it covers. And I'm not sure exactly how to describe it. Like, this season is about sort of a post-COVID, if that makes any sense. As I've said before, it's supposed to be this last year was hard on us all, the show. The show is a lot of people sitting down, talking about, like, their anxieties or what's wrong and being like, let's get through this together. And just that, very direct. And now, a lot of the other Star Treks were direct. Deep Space Nine is very direct in, like, war. Because it's about a war. And when Star Trek tackles these issues, it's generally super direct in the sense of, like, here's this issue happening on this planet somewhere. Or, like, to this crew member somewhere. Sure, sometimes it's a sci-fi concept, like, does AI have rights? That's not really a thing we have to face for quite some time as a species. And it's being done well. It's like, I don't know, here's how this should kind of go. But it's getting to the point, I think I talked about this early on, where it's kind of starting to feel like every episode is like 30% people having roughly the same conversation of like, hey, I notice you're having a bad time. And it's like, oh, I'm not, I'm fine. It's like, oh, well, no, you clearly are. It's like, oh, okay, like I am, here's what's going on. And they're like, hey, look, I've had a hard time too. Let's have a hard time together and talk about it and work on it together and feel better. And they're like, man, yeah, that's great. I'm glad we had this talk. And I feel like that's a good third of every like kind of conversation we're having in Discovery now. And it's like, it's not bad. I mean, it's good to have a show talking about it, but like I'm not a writer. I'm not sure what sort of the correct way to do it. And definitely you should have scenes like that in your show. I'd like to point out. It's not like an abstinence of that. The analogy I'll make is like Darmok, right? Everyone loves Darmok. Darmok's great. You don't want Darmok every episode. If Darmok was every episode, it would suck. Even though that would make sense. Like the Universal Translator's absolute magic. But the Universal Translator's absolute magic, because if Darmok was every episode, it'd be boring. And so there's really like only a handful of times where the translator doesn't instantly work, because when you have the handful of times, then it's like, well, first off, it's entertaining, but it actually has impact and stuff, as opposed to every single episode. And with Discovery, when every single episode is kind of that roughly same conversation, it kind of just wears down after a while and becomes less impactful. And it's just like, oh, we're doing this again. It's like, I can check the news on my phone now. Individually, they're all good scenes. It's just, could you do something else next episode, you know? Or beyond that, could you do it in perhaps more interesting ways? Like, if we look at First Contact is very much a movie about internal grief and the want for revenge and that sort of thing. It's Picard and his relationship with the Borg. But you only really see hints of it, and it's not really directly addressed until like near the very end of the movie. And that theme is kind of interwoven in the narrative a lot. Like there's the big scene of, you know, breaking the tiny ships, like the sort of climax, you'd even say, the emotional climax. But you don't have Picard constantly sitting down and talking about what the Borg did to him and the sort of like, man, I've had a real bad time kind of way. And it was a similar thing in Family, was it? The one after Best of Both Worlds. Picard's trauma was kind of put in his actions and what he was doing, and eventually there was an emotional climax where, like, yeah, he brought it all out, but it took some doing. I don't know. I'm not a writer. As I've said, could I do better than this episode on my own? Hell no. Like, no, it'd be way worse. But it's easy to take a final product and go, for one, did I like it? I mean, anyone can do that. But also go, like, I would have changed this thing, rather than start from a blank page and build it up. But that's the point I've said a lot. Yeah, I can't tell you how to do it better, but I can tell you how to do it wrong. If the bridge fell down, you don't need to be an engineer to say, hey, you did a bad job building that bridge. Alright, I'm going to get into the scene by scene, because I've actually got time pressure at the end of this, and see if any more memories get jogged, and hopefully maybe a bit more positive. I was a bit confused by this. Like, you know, the DMA came from outside the galactic barrier, right? But the civilization is located 30 light years within the galactic barrier? So, like, why did the DMA come from outside? And you might say, oh, you know, it was outside and then it teleported in. But that means it teleported in, so it didn't go through the barrier. So there's no reason, like, it would have whatever barrier particles, or however they figured out it was from the barrier. I'm wondering if maybe this species rose the galactic barrier. Maybe they'll go in that direction. Beta Canon has an answer for that. I think the Q made the Great Barrier to keep out, like, the N or something. It was like something even above the Q. I don't remember. I've never read it. I've just read a synopsis of it. But of course, Beta Canon means that the Prime Canon doesn't have to listen to it, because it's not canon. Small thing, but I like this little shuttle design. Very Orville, actually. It's like the Orville, but with nacelles, which is a nice little 32nd century shuttle design. I will say, as much as I kind of complained about the repetitiveness of the scene, it was interesting to see Dr. Culber's reaction to all this, because, I hadn't really considered that he might blame himself. As a sort of book psychologist, it was kind of an interesting perspective to get. That being said, as well, there was a weird bit where Culber was like, as the ship's psychiatrist, therapist, counselor, that's the word, I'm in charge of the emotional and mental well-being of everybody on board, and that includes Book. And Paul was like, that's an unreasonable standard to have. I'm like, no, it's not. It's his job. Like, as a counselor, he is responsible for the emotional and mental health of all of his patients, which includes everybody on board the Discovery. Sure, Paul is also right that he can't fix his patients' problems, he can just help them to fix it themselves. If I had a counselor who didn't feel in some way responsible for my emotional and mental well-being and health, you should drop that counselor, because they're clearly not very good at their job. I mean, it's like Burnham saying, I'm responsible for the lives of everyone on board, and Saru going, that's just an unreasonable expectation. Hey, I've just remembered Saru is like on a ruling council, isn't he? Funny how that never came up, like I said it wouldn't. I've just realized that modern Star Trek managed to put a tribble on the screen, and I didn't hate it. I also didn't go, oh my god, it's a tribble. It's a tribble. Like, I noticed. But, I mean, it's the first time since Deep Space Nine, I think, where I haven't gone, oh, for God's sake, just stop it with the tribbles. It's not that I don't think they shouldn't return, it's that it's never been done well. Trials and Tribulations was fun. Not that one, sorry. The Trouble with Edward was fun, but not great with canon. Like, it didn't gel super well. There are ways around it, but this is not a Trouble with Edward review. It was also weird to have, like, a changeling in the sense of the race from Deep Space Nine. I just went through a lot of stuff in my head. I was gonna say, you might take it as evidence that Odo's reforms worked, and maybe they became a bit more individualistic, but it seems so against the nature of every changeling we've ever seen, even those set against the link, to, I mean, for one, even desire the wealth. I don't know what the word is, to be essentially a card counter. Not that, but, to cheat casinos. I mean, being so focused on order, you think that a casino that actually followed probability would be what they'd want. But I was gonna say, maybe it's one of the 100, right? It was one of the 100, and so it's kind of been living among solids. Still weird that it would go to that lifestyle, like, very much against changeling nature. Then I realized, well, surely it would have been found or gone back to the Dominion. Like, it's in the part of the space that knows about the Dominion, knows about changelings. It's not like people would forget, wouldn't see a changeling, or at least when I say people, a lot of the races we know are around here, like the Orions. I mean, especially the Orions, that's the only one. But, everyone in the Alpha Beta Quadrant, this area, knows about the Dominion. It's like, hey, you're a changeling. Next to Bajor, there's a wormhole. You can go to the Dominion homeworld. There are other changelings in Star Trek. Maybe you could argue that the changeling tried to turn themselves into a Dominion-style changeling among capture, but that's the sort of thing that bothered me about the tribbles. It's like, you've put the right pictures on screen, but they're actually kind of have ramifications, and it's not really gelling well with what the pictures represent. Discovery has two types of cameos. You either get the right alien doing the wrong thing, or you get the alien doing the right thing with the wrong face. There's a bit that bothered me as well. I don't know why I changed it. I think it was the screen I was just on, where Burnham helped Book capture the guy, and I don't understand why. Like, she didn't know Book was doing that for the isolinium? I can't remember what it was now. She could have probably deduced it. Book wouldn't be helping this guy other than to get the isolinium, I'll call it. And she even looks at herself afterwards like, man, I'm an idiot. But especially coming after the scene where she caved to a lieutenant having a temper tantrum, I'm never going to get over that. It doesn't put her in a good light as a captain. And I'm not saying I want the captains to be invincible. Like, no captain has ever been invincible. And often their best scenes are when they're not, like, fully in control of the situation. Bowing to a temper tantrum. Really, even if she's not a captain, if she's just some woman with a toddler, forget a toddler, with a teenager, someone who really shouldn't be having a temper tantrum, that's not okay. Well, the scene by scene for this episode went quick, and it was a quick recording. Just in time, basically, for me to have to go do something else. I'm enjoying it. As I said, it was probably felt like a pretty negative review, but it was an enjoyable episode. I'm still enjoying Discovery as a whole, hoping they can nail the ending. Monday as well, unless something really bad happens in the next few days, will be Discovery Season 3 Poorly Explained. Finally! If you don't know what Poorly Explained is, it's pretty self-explanatory, but in the end screen's gonna have the link to Picard Poorly Explained, my best video, I think, so far, but comedy recaps, the sort of laugh with Trek, not at it kind of attitude, but I'm really happy with how it's turning out, so be sure to stay tuned for that, as well as my continuing reviews. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time!